AGU and recruited her for this. And so I'll let Deanna introduce Kathy.
Right. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and names here. And I got to meet many of you at AGU in person, which was terrific. So as Jared mentioned in his email this morning, Dr. Boomer is from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, where she serves as scientific program director for sustainable water management. And as Jared mentioned, I met Kathy at AGU in December. She stopped by our booth to learn more about the Critical Zone Collaborative Network. We didn't have a lot of time to talk then because both of us were headed in different directions and we couldn't reconnect there, but we did agree that it would make sense for her to join one of these PI meetings so she could share with you an overview of the foundation and its research priorities. And then she could let you know of emerging funding opportunities that are specific to sustainable water management. So with that very brief introduction, I'll just pass it over to you, Kathy, and thank you for joining us today.
So real quick, sorry, Kathy, I wonder if the PIs might want to introduce yourselves real quick. You know, several of you have agriculture related work and the CZ. So maybe to give Kathy a little bit of background, if we could do that, maybe starting with the most obvious, Praveen.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. I'm Praveen Kumar. I'm at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. As part of this project, we have been studying intensively managed landscapes since 2013. We're in the second phase through this project, and we look at sustainability of agricultural landscape by integrating issues pertaining to water, biogeochemistry, geology, geomorphology, and the human dimensions as well. And our goal is basically to provide an integrated view of how these critical zones function and what are the stressors and how those stresses are amplified or absorbed through as the signals travel through different interfaces. I can speak more about it if need be. Thank you.
Emma.
Unmute myself. Yeah. So I'm Emma Aronson. I'm an associate professor at UC Riverside, and I'm leading the geomicrobiology cluster. And while our cluster is not asking questions specifically about agriculture, I personally and many of the PIs on my project think a lot about microbial interactions in the soil with agricultural plants. So it would be interesting to kind of think about ways to link our expertise and think about ways to potentially expand the reach of our current project, which focuses much more on soil formation processes and geomicrobiology. So, but I'd love to sort of think about how we can go further with that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Holly Barnard.
Hi, I'm Holly. I lead a cluster out of CU Boulder as with multiple other institutions. Our project is focused on mostly headwater streams in the semi-arid West, but certainly has implications for downstream communities. A lot of the water does get used for agriculture as we move downstream. So look forward to hearing your presentation.
Holly Michael.
Hi, Kathy. You know me. I'm a professor at UD. And I think I've talked to you about our cluster before. We're looking at marsh migration into agricultural fields. And this is the project I mentioned working on with Kate Tully and Karen Gadan, who I think you know as well. I'm always happy to talk more about that.
Station.
Hi, Kathy. I'm Li Xinjian from University of Texas, El Paso. I'm the lead PI for the Dryland cluster. 2 out of 5 sites we have are on agriculture field. One in Texas, New Mexico area. The other one is in Idaho. So we ask questions about water demands for the agriculture field, but also connect the water dynamics with salt buildup hydrogenic carbon accumulation, as well as carbon dioxide dynamics.
Thanks. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Holbrook from Virginia Tech, and I lead the Bedrock cluster. And while our project doesn't directly bear on agriculture, there are a couple of connections because some of our work is relevant to questions of forest resilience through drought. And one of our sites on the East Coast was geomorphically highly influenced by 19th century agriculture and clear cutting. So yeah, nice to meet you.
Thanks, Steve. Claire?
Hi, this is Claire Welty. I'm on the 215 number. I'm a faculty member in environmental engineering at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I head up the urban critical zone cluster, and we're interested in the interaction of anthropogenic activities with the critical zone and how that may affect weathering processes. We're not working with agriculture directly, but as Steve just mentioned, which is a really great connection to think about, we are working in a lot of suburban areas that are built on, land that was farmed 100 years ago. So we have that legacy of chemical signatures in some places for the lands that are now suburban tract housing. There also is an interest, so the cities of Baltimore, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Raleigh, North Carolina, there is also an interest in some people in Baltimore on urban agriculture, which some folks may not realize is a burgeoning field. And that's not directly something we're working on with this project, but it is a related interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. So to get everybody, I think I did. Okay. So Kathy, sorry for the interruption, but I thought that might be helpful. The other people on the line, Clara, Deanna, Jeff, and Kirsten are part of the critical zone hub that supports the thematic clusters.
See. So that's great and super helpful. I'm sure by the end of today, we'll realize that we're seeing the same opportunities and connections. I thought I would start with just a general overview of FAR. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with us. We are what I'd call a quasi nonprofit. I'd say quasi because we are funded by the Farm Bill to provide support for research that addresses challenges in food supply and agricultural sustainability. So our mission is to build unique partnerships that support innovative science addressing the food and agricultural challenges. Those unique partnerships, what that's referring to is that every dollar we invest in research has to be matched by non-federal dollars. And the premise or the idea behind that requirement is to kind of shepherd opportunities to work with stakeholders on the ground and really foster applied research that can be brought into the decision context, into everyday agricultural management. Our vision, we envision a world in which ever innovating and collaborative science provides every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. Most of our work is focused within the domestic US, but we can fund international projects, especially if those projects are designed in a way to foster knowledge exchange across international boundaries. Again, I already mentioned the federally funded. To date, we have gone through 2 cycles of the Farm Bill for a total of $385 million investment that we bring in with non-federal, an equal non-federal match. And there's 4 main ways that we can make funding awards. So first is through competitive grants that everyone is familiar with. Right now we have our 2 annual grants open for pre-proposals. They include our seeding solutions initiative, which is open to anyone with research related to our challenge areas, which I'll share more about in just a minute. The awards can range anywhere from $300,000 to $1 million. And the applicants bring in that match as part of their application package. We also provide direct awards. So these tend to be larger collaborations, multi-institutional, multi-organizational collaboratives that are designed to really tackle a paradigm and shift, kind of create a more collaborative community approach to research. And again, I think by the end of today's discussion, you'll have a good feel for the kinds of projects that might come in under our direct award mechanism. The third mechanism is through consortia or partnerships. These partnerships provide opportunities for partners to come together to focus on a specific topic and create funding opportunities within that topic. So what's neat about the consortia is that they're more specific than our seeding solutions grant, right? So, and it really provides an opportunity to foster connected individual projects in a way that the sum can be greater than the parts. And we can have our industry and academic partners play an active role in awarding those grant opportunities and also in synthesizing the results or the outcomes of those projects. A fourth way that FAR can fund is through prizes. So if there was a kind of an idea to create a competition that industry or non-federal partners might want to support, we could provide an opportunity to award a prize. So this is a little bit different in that the money is given kind of at the end to the recipient rather than funding up front for proposed research. Just to give you an example, right now we have our egg prize, and that is if you're not familiar right now, in the egg laying industry, they have to sex. There's a lot of waste because they can't sex the eggs until they've hatched. So the male chicks are cold and the female chicks go on in their role in the egg laying industry. What FAR is trying to promote is technology that would allow us to sex the eggs prior to hatching. And in that way, we'd be able to use the eggs for different applications. So there's both an animal welfare component as well as a direct benefit to the supply chain. And just to highlight, we have currently over 400 funding partners. And we've developed partnerships to address our 6 challenge areas. These 6 challenge areas I think of as roughly paralleling the food supply chain. So they start with feed production, a focus on soil health, sustainable water management, and next generation crops. We also have a challenge area focused on advanced animal systems, human health agriculture nexus, and urban food systems. Just to dive in a little bit within sustainable water management, what I've been working on since coming to FAR in 2019 is looking to promote research that enables us to better protect a supply of quality water to sustain consumption, production, and the environment. And so the research priorities coming out of that is thinking, do we have a clear understanding of the threats to those water supplies? What are the best practices to mitigate or address those threats? What is the right guidance in terms of thinking about where that technology needs to be applied and how much work we need to do to minimize those threats? And then a fourth important area is, once we have the right information, the technology, how do we convince or work with stakeholders to adopt that technology? A fifth area is focuses on better connecting the resources that the public resources that we have for monitoring. How do we leverage those resources and integrate the results with field research that enables us to better understand those threats and to think about those practices and where those practices can make a big difference. So you can see there's a real focus on kind of the interconnected aspects of those research priorities, all dedicated toward improving water resource management. Another challenge area that I wanted to bring up today, because it's so tightly linked to the work that we're doing, is our soil challenge area. And again, you can see the parallels in Lakeisha Odom's challenge area, focused on resiliency and adaptation, site-specific decision-making, human well-being, and novel pathways to adoption. And I highlight Lakeisha's challenge area because it gives me a really great chance to emphasize that we're very careful and kind of more excited to actually bridge our challenge areas rather than silo research to one of our challenge areas. I'm also really excited to share a new initiative at FAR. That's our Ag Climate Initiative, which is dedicated to advancing US agriculture so that it has a net negative for greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030. And the idea is to mobilize scientists and farmers to unlock climate solving potential of our farmlands, really focused on increasing carbon sequestration and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What's really, I think, exciting is the program's commitment to connecting various databases, data hubs, and bringing together expertise that can improve the knowledge transfer to the farming community so that we can help them better address their concerns related to practice adoption. So I'll just pause there. I've given you kind of a whirlwind tour of what FAR is about in terms of the funding capacity that we can bring in our different challenge areas. I will say I will share this slide deck with everyone on the call. And in that slide deck, I've included the priorities for all 6 of our challenge areas. To save time, I didn't want to run through them now, but you will have those at your fingertips when I send the slide deck out immediately following the call. So I'll just pause there before I dive a little bit deeper and tell you about the programs we're developing in sustainable water management to see if there's any questions about FAR. And if not,
So Steve,
yes.
Just really quickly, Kathy, thank you for this. Could you just say a little bit about the matching fund requirement for the proposals?
Yeah. It's a 1-to-1 match requirement. The match has to be non-federal dollars. So it could be industry, but it also could be foundation money or state funds. For example, we're somewhat flexible in what constitutes non-federal dollars. The other really important aspect to know about that match requirement is that only half of that requirement has to be cash match, or 25% of the total budget. And that 25% can include non-federal salary. The other 25% of the full budget can be in-kind match, which can include equipment, for example, leases on land access, for example. So there's quite a bit of flexibility with that in-kind versus cash match requirement.
Kathy, I just put a email in the chat. You can just, if you could just send the slides to Maddie, then she can distribute them. So
Great.
thank you.
Okay, so now I'm going to dive in deep, and you'll see why I'm so excited to connect with this group, and why I'm so excited to connect with Holly and Praveen and Steve Lohide. See, come on. I need trouble advancing to my next slide. So where we're landing in terms of what we're seeing as a real critical need in sustainable water management is a better understanding of how hydrologic fluxes through the plant rooting zone influence not only crop health, but also environmental impacts in the ecosystem services that these agroecosystems can provide. And I really am a fan of Ying Fan's work at Rutgers. I think she had a great article that just really captured where our focus is right now. She published a paper looking at the hydrologic regulation of the plant rooting depths, and found some very compelling evidence of how plant rooting depth relates to kind of landscape position and the water table regime, and emphasized the importance of kind of that bottom up control on the imposed by water table fluctuations and exposure to shallow groundwater, and the influence that that resource has on the soil plant environment. And FAR has really taken that concept, and we want to go take it even further and to look at the hydrologic regulation of soil microbial activity, as well as plant rooting depth and the subsequent effects on plant production, carbon sequestration, and nutrient dynamics. We think this is really important for two reasons. One, we want to acknowledge that these processes are very tightly integrated and connected. So we want to fund research that tries to overcome, I'm broad brushing here, so pardon me, kind of the historic siloing of for example, looking at water quality impacts versus carbon sequestration and soil health. The other opportunity, again, I mentioned is this focus on better understanding when and where top-down controls imposed, for example, by precipitation versus those bottom-up controls imposed by the water table primarily control those biogeochemical processes underlying soil health. And thinking about when and where and these processes vary, how they vary across space, we see as essential to predicting how these systems will respond as climate change continues. And again, climate change being expected, climate change and human activities likely to have a significant effect on water table position and fluctuations throughout the growing season. So with that, there's 4 programs that I wanted to share today, in part to show how kind of that gap is influencing the programs that we're developing. And also these programs will give you kind of a sense for, give you examples of how FAR can help promote these research collaborations and can help fund these research collaborations. So the first one is focuses on advancing the next generation of fertilizers. It doesn't have a catchy title. It's integrating soil biogeochemistry and fertilizer sciences to improve ecosystem services across agricultural landscapes. This is a direct fund program that we're trying to facilitate. Praveen and Holly were instrumental to moving this program along. We are trying to pull together two different community of scientists who focus on the same soil processes, but from very different perspectives. We have the fertilizer scientists who are thinking a lot about the chemical formulations and how we apply those formulations across the landscape to increase crop production. And what's really exciting is that the fertilizer community realizes that the model of selling as much fertilizer as possible is not sustainable, that they need to develop products that optimize field conditions, not only for crop production, but also, again, for those ecosystem services we know are so important to long-term sustainability. The other community that we brought together or to this partnership are researchers who focus more from the biogeochemistry side. This will be much more familiar to this group. Folks who are thinking about these biogeochemical processes and how they vary across landscapes, across hydroclimatic gradients, and also in relation to watershed position or landscape setting. And again, bringing these different perspectives together to think about how variation in water table fluctuations influence these key processes underlying soil health. This collaboration is, we have players at the table. Where we are now is the challenge of really exciting partnership that agrees on the hypotheses at the 30,000 foot level. What we need to do is kind of hone in on how do we tackle or articulate underlying hypotheses that can be tested on the ground at the field scale. And what we're excited about, which would be kind of unique, is because of the diversity of ideas that we realized we should not have been surprised about, but when pulling together a collaborative of 10 to 20 different PIs, we have very different ideas about how to tackle that research question. And so what we plan to do is take a year out to work together and develop model-based hypotheses. So leverage models like DayCent and DNDC to inform us, to help us wrap our heads around a set of hypotheses that this group can tackle across the range of locations. And so really dedicating time to developing those conceptual models instead of kind of that rush to kind of package those models and bring them together that we all are familiar with when developing a research proposal for NSF, for example. And again, the constraints on that research is really thinking about how can we provide better guidance regarding where to apply a fertilizer, the timing and the rate of that fertilizer application, and the place. Where is it appropriate, or where are those fertilizers needed to optimize conditions? So that's a direct fund where we're helping to bring together the partners who will develop a proposal that will be submitted to FAR and will go external peer review without, I think what's different is it will not have competition. It's not a yes fund or no, don't fund that project. The investigators will have an opportunity to work through FAR to refine their proposal and bring that proposal around. It's essentially a more guaranteed route of funding, but it's also a real challenge in bringing those partners together around a cohesive set of hypotheses that is compelling to an external peer review board. The second project or program that we're developing that I wanted to share is a consortium. So this is an example where we're pulling together partners who are willing to contribute to fund research. And that partnership releases the RFA announcements. This one will focus on drainage innovation and technology for crop health and ecosystem services, or which we fondly call our DITCHES program. And again, you'll see a common thread to the fertilizer partnership that we're promoting. Again, we're focusing on those biogeochemical processes underlying health. But in this case, we're really looking at how water management, especially drainage management, and its effects on the water table will influence those processes and help us identify how can we optimize water table management in a way to sustain food production, but also address the environmental impacts that have long been associated with agriculture. Another example of our consortium is our Irrigation Innovation Consortium. This is one that was started before I came to FAR in 2018. It is a model that we're using for our DITCHES program. It's kind of an exciting time because the IIC is heading down the home stretch of their 5-year award and thinking about applying for our next 5-year slug of money, if you will. I think what's really exciting is they're coming to a similar focus as our fertilizer partnership and our DITCHES partnership, and that is a better understanding of how the role that irrigation can play in regulating or managing those biogeochemical processes underlying soil health. Across all 3 of these programs, not only are we pushing kind of a better understanding of how the supply of water affects these processes, but we also want a better understanding of how the chemistry of that water supply influences those processes. So again, a nuance that's often overlooked, but obviously could be really significant if where the supply of water changes from groundwater to primarily rainwater, or from shallow young groundwater to older, more concentrated groundwater, deeper groundwater supplies that we often use for irrigation. Okay, and then the last program that I wanted to share with you today is an example of our bringing together partners who directly fund a research proposal. The one that we're working on is achieving conservation through targeting, information, outreach, and networking. This is a program that we have the Walton Family Foundation on board to fund research that will really drive at pulling together, integrating social science and the biophysical sciences to advance or increase stakeholder adoption of these conservation practices. This opportunity, this program comes out of a workshop that we convened last January. We pulled together social scientists, farmers, and outreach practitioners to think about how can outreach practitioners better spend their time and their resources working with farmers to help them, convince them, compel them to adopt the conservation practices. And some really kind of helpful, I think, model came out of that discussion. And one was just acknowledging the timeline of that adoption process, right? So there's that initial process where the farmers become aware of the challenge and the opportunity to address that challenge. There's kind of a second stage where we can take them from awareness to a willingness to adopt those practices. And then there's a third stage of going from willingness to actual implementation and adoption. And then there's kind of the different aspects of that might influence their transition from one stage to the next. That might be helpful to a technical service provider thinking about when and where they might use their resources to influence that process or move that process along more efficiently. What was interesting to know is that everyone participating in the workshop had all recognized the importance of information and knowledge, but had very different ideas about what that knowledge is or what information could be useful to moving the stakeholders along in that process. And so this is really what FAR sees as an exciting opportunity to better connect, to provide a funding opportunity where social scientists could measure or evaluate different strategies for working with the farmers. And those strategies all being built around the information that is developed from the biophysical side of the equation, from the biophysical community of scientists, and engaging what's the right level of detail, what's the right type of information, and how do we package that information in a way that could compel a farmer to adopt those practices. And I think what's really exciting about this program is there's an opportunity for some feedback from the outreach community and the farmers to the biophysical community in terms of helping us think about how we can better connect our work to what happens on the ground. So I also went on a bit about that program that we're developing because it gives me a really great chance to share one of our favorite ways for engaging the science community and our stakeholders, and that is through convening events. So not only do we provide funding, but the FAR staff, each of our challenge areas tries to host at least one, maybe two convening events a year that pull together researchers and industry to identify these pre-competitive white spaces, if you will, and to start to initiate or spark the kind of collaborations that we can fund through FAR. And the last role, that very active role that we take to share with you is our investment in the scientific workforce. We do have a number of programs dedicated to advancing the next generation of scientists, including FAR Fellows programs. We have a Vet Fellows program. We have prizes for agricultural science. And then we have our new Innovators award program. This is an annual grant competition that's open to new faculty who have received their appointment within the past 8 years. Unlike most grant competitions, this program is really designed to help new faculty establish their research programs, right? So it's not just one particular project, but setting an investigator up to tackle a suite of projects that relate back to the our priorities at FAR. So I hope through my overview of FAR and kind of a deep dive into sustainable water management, you'll see that FAR is really about fostering collaboration. And just leave with my contact information. I'm excited to continue the conversation here, answer your questions, share ideas for collaboration. I also shared my colleague, Catherine Maxwell's contact information. She is our Director of Strategic Partnerships and is a dynamo at kind of pulling in industry partners, non-federal partners, kind of matching their interest up with academia to kind of optimize the opportunities that we have through FAR. And that's my spiel, and I'm excited to take on questions.
Thank you, Kathy. That's great. I see a lot of synergies here, and so I hope we can make something happen here. So, questions for Kathy? Lishan.
Kathy, thank you for the presentation. It's great opportunities for funding and more. My question is that, are you interested in project that actually combines science with engineers? For example, for our dryland agriculture systems, irrigation water bring a lot of salinity, right? So there will be a great interest to use water kind of treatment devices, treat the water before they can be used for irrigation that can improve the infiltration and also salinity. Would your foundation be interested in funding a project like that?
Yes. So right off the bat, I would encourage you to check out our Irrigation Innovation Consortium. You'll see they should be releasing an RFP for 2022 in fairly soon. I expect in the next 4 to 8 weeks, there'll be an RFA. Your research interests also give me an opportunity to share one of the convening events that we're planning right now is we'll focus on the connections between soil health and water management in arid and semi-arid climates of the US. So right now we have a working agenda. We're pulling together a committee to help us refine that agenda, help us identify speakers to maximize that opportunity and identify participants. So there would be another great way to work together.
Yeah, I will send you an email and follow up on that.
Okay, and again, the idea of that consortium really is to pull industry together with academia and foster these kind of collaborations and programs.
Super cool, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kathy? So I expect when you go home, you'll think of more questions for Kathy. And so Kathy, thank you for providing your contact information and for being with us here today. It sounds like some really exciting work that's impactful. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say there's a lot of flexibility in terms of developing these partnerships. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about what constitutes match or how you can coordinate matching. If you have ideas for collaboration or a research topic, again, reach out to us. I can, just to give you a good idea there. Just this week, we've been approached, I think, for a really exciting idea to explore the connections between human wastewater treatment management and livestock treatment management. That it turns out there are two separate communities that we haven't really connected in a way that might be helpful to advancing both needs more efficiently. So just a really great example to show the diversity of kind of projects and the opportunity that there is in terms of working with FAR as a funding partner.
Thanks, Holly. Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I just more of a comment, I guess. I don't want to speak for you, Kathy, but in my experience, you are really great at connecting people with similar interests, and so I think even if maybe we don't necessarily have an industry partner in mind or things like that, I think that you can help with that, right? Because I know that, so two of our co-PIs on our CZN put in a proposal several months ago with a collaborator that you introduced them to virtually, Kathy, I think. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to meet people through FAR that we could collaborate with.
Yep. Oh, Holly, I so appreciate that. That's definitely one of our favorite roles and part of what we see as essential to bringing all hands on deck to tackle these global challenges.
Thank you. Everyone check the notes again. You can find the link to where the presentation will be added. You can see a couple of notes about upcoming CZCN meetings for dust and dry lands and other opportunities there as well. So thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks everyone for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Stay well. Take care.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kat.